It's around Halloween again, and this year I want to celebrate with a special themed run. All we have to do is defeat bosses while in costume. Of course, I'll change costumes for every remembrance boss, and try to keep each one as accurate as possible. As for the costumes themselves, just like on Halloween, they mostly consist of typical monsters like zombies and witches, but I've thrown in a few less conventional costumes that I think will make fun builds, as well as a couple of Elden Ring specific ones. To make it easier, I've put them all in alphabetical order and will be going down the list for the main bosses. We don't have many rules to discuss, so let's start the run. This time I started out as an astrologer because of the way I've planned out the run. First, I'm headed to Celia Crystal Tunnel to get to Caelid quickly, as there are a couple things I need to get there. Before I do anything else, I put a few levels into intelligence. From here, I pick up the Faithful's Canvas Talisman, so I don't have to do it later. Then I think it's time for us to leave this terrible place, since the mini-boss is clearly not happening right now. In the Swamp Ruins, we'll pick up the meteorite staff from the corpse hanging out the window. As one must always do in Elden Ring, I rush to both forts for both halves of the Dectus Medallion, as well as the Sword Seal. Also, as I do this, I'll be sure to pick up any upgrade materials like Sacred Tears and Golden Seeds, but I'll be doing that off camera. There's no need to show every single flask upgrade. Once I've gotten my Physic and reached fort height, it's time to make our way towards the Grand Lift. This means we need to jump around Stormvale Castle and go through the entirety of Liurnia until we make it to the end. Thankfully, this area is very generous with its teleporters. Alright, since I've gotten this far, it's probably time to explain what I'm doing here. I want to open up the DLC as early as possible so we have more options in the way of costumes. So I want Radahn to be the first shardbearer we kill in this run. Because of this, I rushed to Altus to trigger the Radahn Festival without doing Ronnie's quest. The first creature on the list we're dressing up as is an alien, so I want all the space-themed spells I can find. Technically, any type of sorcery would do since it all originates from the cosmos, but I'm looking for the ones that specifically have things like star or comet in the name. Meteorites and gravity spells could also work, that just wasn't the theme I wanted for this particular alien. Naturally, the spells I have in mind require lots of intelligence. Starter spells just won't do for an intelligent life form like us. Once we've gotten some levels from Grail, we can work on collecting the spells we'll need for the Radahn battle. These are both tied to Selen's quest, so we'll speak with her after we find Master Azure to get the Sealbreaker, use it, then get Stars of Ruin from Lusat. We have an uneventful fight with one of many Erdtree avatars for our magic shrouding tier, and as we continue exploring Liurnia, we'll pick up the Glintstone Key so we can get all the gear we need from inside the academy. Behind the illusory wall, we can get Comet and the Graven School Talisman, both of which will be fitting for an alien costume. Lastly, I need the actual costume part of the build, and we'll need to go all the way to Volcano Manor for that. Now we sneak up behind the Omen Killer and claim our Albinoric mask. It might as well just be an alien mask. It looks just like the stereotypical gray alien, doesn't it? I could have changed my character's skin to gray, but decided not to because I didn't want to look like I was just dressing up as an Albinoric, though that would be a good costume on its own, I'm sure. Most of the armor that looked futuristic or alien-like was locked behind late-game content, so I had to settle with simply looking weird. So I went to the Seethwater Cave to pick up the mushroom set because I think it would be fitting for an alien to have some strange growths on their body that you wouldn't see on terrestrial creatures. It fits the lore, in a way, since the mushrooms are a product of the Scarlet Rot, which is itself a product of an outer god, which is basically an alien. As all mages do, I've neglected Vigor in order to reach the intelligence requirements for the spells I'm using. I don't plan to ignore Vigor for the whole run, but since I'm starting out with a very powerful setup, I'm sticking to a glass cannon build to balance it out. As you can see, if I were good at dodging and/or could tank more than an attack or two, the Red Wolf would be dead with just a few charged comets. I chose to mix it up just a little and throw in Star Shower every now and then. That one's also harder for bosses to dodge. After this fight, I'll focus on my health a little bit, but I still need more intelligence to use Comet Azure, even with the intelligence boost I get from the Crystal Tier. The Putrid Avatar in Dragon Barrow is a very easy way to get a lot of souls early on. It's tougher than the others, but a tree is still just a tree, and once you've memorized its moveset, it won't be hard to kill it even with a weaker character. All that we need to do now is head back to Caelid and join the festivities. I would say this is around the regular level to fight Radahn, but since I've pretty much dedicated all of my levels to damage, I still felt like I could be a glass cannon here. I really want to hit him with the funny laser, but it's a very situational spell that is way too risky for the majority of enemies, especially ones that move around as much as he does. Instead, I used it for Margit so I could go ahead and equip a second talisman. The real fight's not until later, so there's no need to feel bad about cheesing him. There is really no need to use this spell at all for Radahn because my other two spells do enough damage to get him well below half health before he jumps into the air. But I used it anyway, started panicking when it didn't kill him, and threw away a guaranteed victory. It's a fun little gimmick spell, but I'm not going to sabotage myself again, so I stuck with boring old Comet and Stars of Ruin. I really like that Stars of Ruin will align for you when locked on even if you're on Torrent facing the opposite direction. Not all spells work this well. Until Miquella comes to undo all our hard work, we can relax for a moment and claim some levels from Radahn. Our next Halloween costume is going to be a Banshee. A simple but effective build that needs only one attack. All a Banshee needs to do is scream. We'll need to get the beast's roar Ash of War from Gurranq, so let's focus on that first. He'll only give it to us after we collect 5 death roots from the various spooky scary skeletons across the map. For the outfit, a simple dress will do. We'll get the Finger Maiden dress for the cloak, then find a hood to go with it. The bloodstains also work well for the Banshee costume, as Banshees are associated with impending death, so it certainly fits that ominous role. We can slap the Beast Roar skill on a dagger and it will still do decent damage. Apparently this skill doesn't scale with AR, but rather with weapon upgrade level and dexterity. For that reason, I'll give my dagger the Keen affinity to boost its dex scaling. To get the hood, I'm traveling to the Sage's Cave to pick up the black hood from a chest. The Astrologer starting class does come with a hood, but it doesn't obscure as much of the face as the black hood does, and I want to capture the shrouded look as much as I can with the gear currently obtainable. Lastly, we'll have a screaming match with the troll, get our roar medallion for the damage boost, and now we've got everything we need to fight our next remembrance boss. Renala's the one I've chosen to face next because she's very important for a run like this that requires me to swap out gear constantly. I want to have the option to respec before I get too far in. Having a dagger is useful for the first phase to disable the singing without wasting any FP, and you don't have to actually kill them, just a quick little warning slash will shut them up. I have a feeling that it'll take a while to kill Renala in the first phase, but at least Beast Roar is FP efficient for the damage it does. Plus, it uses exactly all of the FP we have, so not a single blue flask has to go to waste. The second phase won't be so bad since she's very vulnerable to staggers. I wasn't sure if I would have enough FP to do this, but I did have some Starlight Shards to save the day so I wouldn't be stuck chipping her with the dagger. This part wasn't very difficult, but it was very annoying that she kept running away and summoning every time I got a small opening in between the spell spam. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, so it's best we start getting some vigor because we will need it. For our next costume, we will be a cat. Not a monster, but a mischievous little creature. Cats are often associated with Halloween, for better or worse, so it still goes with the theme of the run. We're gonna need a good mask for our cat costume, so we're headed down to the Murkwater Catacombs to farm one from the imps. After that, we'll just need a couple pieces of the fur set, which thankfully has a much better drop rate than the imp head. Like I said before, I'm trying to get to the DLC early, so the next remembrance boss I'd like to fight is Mohg, so I have lots of preparation to do. After killing Eleonora and getting the Purifying Tear, I'm going to try to defeat the Draconic Tree Sentinel so I can get some things from Leyndell. I have just about had it with this guy's input reading BS, so I'm upgrading the claws to plus 15 just for him. We can get some vigor and go through the level like a real cat. This would definitely be a fun place for a cat to explore. After a long day of hunting imps on the roof, you can climb up dragons and giant trees. How lovely it is to be a simple cat with no worries. The main reason I came to the capital was to kill Goldfree and get my last talisman pouch. In doing this, I also got enough vigor to take off the sore seal. Sure, a cat likes to climb up high and perch on the branches up above, but they also love to stalk the sewers down below and take care of the rat problem in the city. I don't think the inhabitants of the sewers wanted any competition for food sources, though. Defeating Mini-Moog may not be necessary, but it's good practice for the first phase of the real fight. Although, if you really don't want to do it, you can open the chest without fighting him. At least it'll give us some extra levels before the real fight, which I used on Endurance this time, since claws rely on high stamina for high DPS. Speaking of claws, I'm also going to pick up the Claw Talisman to boost our jump attacks, and since I'm only relying on physical damage, I suppose the Axe Talisman for charged attacks wouldn't hurt either. As I collected upgrade materials, I went all the way down to the Eternal City to have a cat fight with the Mimic Tier. The Mimic Tier was surprisingly formidable this time around. The bleed buildup on the claws is very powerful if your opponent tries to outspam you, and I got a chance to see it firsthand. I almost forgot about the Winged Sword insignia. This is a must-have for any type of fist or claw weapons. Alright, I think we should be ready for Moog now. You'd be surprised by how far you can upgrade a single weapon without going to the mountaintops. All of his attacks will now scatter blood flame across the arena, so if you try to escape, he can easily put you in a blender with how quickly the meter goes up. I tried to use the stance breaking tier to stagger him as much as I could in the first phase, and hopefully cancel out a good portion of the health he gets back from knee healing. But even if you don't get him to bleed out during the phase transition, there's no need to get discouraged. If you keep close and capitalize on all your openings, he'll bleed out and be right back at half health. We are a cat, so the best thing we have is our pouncing ability. With the Claw Talisman, it's especially powerful, and it also immediately activates the Winged Sword insignia for an added bonus on top of that. Despite all the jump attacks, I never managed to stagger him in phase 2, but keeping up the pressure made it easy to bleed him out multiple times. Finally succumbing to his wounds, our prey collapses in a fiery pool of his own blood, leaving the entrance to the Land of Shadow unguarded. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here. We still haven't even killed Morgott, so let's claim these levels and head above. The next monster on the list is a devil, or the devil, which is me. Now that we've defeated Moog, the most important aspect of our costume, the trident, can now be traded for his remembrance. The Inquisitor's Girandol would be another good option, but the Mohgwyn Sacred Spear is too perfect to pass up. You can tell how demonic it is just from looking at it. I got the horns already from farming ancestral followers. Now I just need the Fire Monk armor to really get that devil look down. We'll be engaging in some devilish activities by assassinating the Tarnished Warriors for the Volcano Manor quest. Once we've shown our resolve, Patches will give us a special request to kill Tragoth. Am I crazy or did it just shrink? Okay, Tragoth is taken care of. We got what we wanted, which is his armor, specifically the greaves. The pointed toes are the closest thing I could find to hoof-like armor in this game. Unfortunately, these greaves are very heavy, but since this build doesn't use all the talisman slots, we can go to Caelid to challenge the Jar Duelist to get the special talisman from the Great Jar. I chose the one that looked the weakest first, but appearances can be deceiving. No matter, I'm also a master in the art of deception. In fact, trickery is the only way I know to achieve victory. Once I've gotten the Great Jar's arsenal, I go back to Lanedale to get my last costume piece, which is Alberish's bracers. Hey, this costume is looking really good. This may be the most cohesive one yet. In any case, we've got our costume ready for Morgott, but before that, I want to get a few quests out of the way before progressing to the mountaintops. After talking to Ronnie and all of her companions, I set out to get the final touches for my devil build. We get the flame-shrouding cracked tear from the Caelid tree avatar, and finally, we go back to Mount Gelmir to grab the fire scorpion charm before we challenge Morgott. We're probably a little over-leveled for this, but even if that weren't the case, our build would still be very effective against Morgott, since he's susceptible to bleed and weaker to fire damage. He also staggers very easily, which we can exploit even more with the cracked tier. As he starts puking, we get a free chance to knee heal since we have enough health to tank through the AoE. Overall, this was an easy fight with the devil setup, but even so, his attack patterns provided enough of a challenge for it to not feel totally one-sided. It's time for a change of clothes. Next up is a dragon. Just as Yura says, a dragon is as fearsome as it is majestic. Perfect for a Halloween costume. This was a hard costume to put together. Somehow, with all of the armor in this game, there isn't a single helmet that truly looks like a dragon head. Obviously with the DLC you have items that can turn you into a dragon, but one of them requires beating a main boss, and the other I forgot about at the time of doing this. Either way, I prefer to do it the old-fashioned way and put together a scuffed dragon costume. I feel like turning into a dragon would be cheating. I was having trouble finding a helmet I was happy with. I tried the marionette helm since the beak could almost look like a dragon, but it didn't really work, and the bloodhound helm didn't quite do it either. While I think about what to wear, I can start collecting the other things I'll need, like spells and weapons. The Dragon Communion Seal is an obvious choice for this build, and for the spells, I decided to use ones that deal physical damage since they will also conjure either draconic limbs or a head, which adds to the illusion we're trying to achieve with our costume. While I have plenty of arcane for Dragon Communion spells, I haven't touched faith at all, so I'll need to pick up some faith boosting gear to make up for it. Even though I couldn't find any armor that looked like claws, it doesn't matter because I've opened the DLC, so I can kill this first NPC to get the beast claws. These are purely cosmetic. I don't intend to use them to attack. Sadly, we can only have one claw when wielding the sacred seal, but it still looks pretty cool. I finally decided what helmet to wear. It ended up being the Banished Knight helm since it has a dragon on top of it. I figured that was close enough. I also kept on the Bull Goat Greaves since the pointed feet slightly resemble claws. I did level my faith slightly, but since it still wasn't enough, I went to pick up Marika's Scar Seal. Godric is much weaker than us, so we want to give him at least a small chance to beat us. So we're fighting him with an unupgraded seal to compensate for being almost level 100. But the boss I fought in a dragon costume had to be him. How else will we decide who wore it better? Despite my attempts to hold back, I couldn't contain my power like I'd hoped to. Perhaps hitting him with the debuff first was a bit too harsh. Dragon Maw is literally biting chunks out of him, and our damage is so high that it cancels out the extra defense he gets upon transitioning to Phase 2. Try as he might, he couldn't escape the jaws of death. That wasn't much of a fight, so I'm going to stay in my dragon costume a bit longer while I take care of some mini-bosses. Commander O'Neill was also a joke. But after all the pain he's put me through, he could never make me feel bad for him, so I purposely took the riposte with the unupgraded Beast Claw to rub it in. Now we can get Millicent's quest started. There's a lot of useful items down the line, and we'll also get extra chances to use our dragon build as we defeat mini-bosses. Let's not forget to finish Selen's quest. I'll be needing the Eccentric set for later. I don't really need any of her spells, but I'm buying them anyway to turn her into a ball because it's funny. After acquiring the first half of the Halig Tree Medallion, I'm going to upgrade my Sacred Seal as much as I can before taking on Commander Nile. Hopefully we can make this fight as painless as the first Commander fight was, but I have a feeling I'll have no such luck. At least damage doesn't seem like it'll be a problem. I just can't get too careless in the beginning when his minions are still alive. It did take a couple of tries, but this fight didn't end up being so bad after all. To get a head start, I would run up to him as fast as I could and start roaring while the minions are still spawning in. Once they materialize, they don't have any iframes and will be staggered instantly. If you're lucky, you can get both of them in a single cast. The range is fairly large, and it also lasts a long time, so even if you only get one with the initial blast, the other is sure to follow. As for the commander himself, just focus on your spacing, and you should get a chance to use Dragon Maw at the end of his combos. Dragon Maw has good hyper armor and can tank through some of his attacks, so I'd say this trade was more in my favor. With the second half of the medallion in our possession, I'd say it's about time we swap costumes. I'm taking some inspiration from the Dark Souls Bell Gargoyles, of course. So for my weapon, I've chosen a halberd, which will be used alongside crucible spells to represent the gargoyle's wings and tail. Obviously, the halberd we'll use is none other than the gargoyle's halberd. We'll need to kill the Stormhill Crucible Knight for the aspects of the Crucible Tail incantation. Once we've done that, we need to go back to the Lands of Shadow to take the Spirit Spring to Shadow Altus. There, we'll find Black Knight Edred waiting for us in the fort. If we can manage to defeat him, we'll get the aspects of the Crucible Wings skill to put on our halberd. Even with nearly 60 vigor, with such a low Shadow Blessing, he's bound to do ridiculous damage, just like every other enemy in the Lands of Shadow. Knowing this, it wasn't very smart to try to fight him with a +8 halberd, because once I swallowed my pride and upgraded it to a passable level, that mostly solved any problems this fight was giving me. Alright, we've got all our weapons. Now we need to put together a gargoyle costume and we'll be all set. The armor is going to be super easy to get. We simply break the enchantment by walking into the Shadow Keep, tell Moore to be sad forever, and lo and behold, we have the verdigris set. We'll be wearing the full set aside from the helmet. Instead, I'm wearing the Fanged Imp head, which I got from Wyndham Catacombs earlier. For this build, I'm choosing to stay in heavy load as it fits for a statue to move kind of sluggishly. As heavy as we are, it doesn't affect our ability to fly. We can use our wings to help close some distance while doing damage at the same time. I chose the Regal Ancestor Spirit as the Gargoyle's main opponent because the matchup doesn't seem too skewed. The Gargoyle build isn't super overpowered, so we'll have a chance to enjoy the fight a bit longer than we normally do. This is a very beautiful fight with equally beautiful music, but sadly it hardly has any health, so even if you come here at the proper level, it tends to get killed quickly. As expected, this fight didn't pose much of a threat for the Gargoyle, so we'll do one more before we swap costumes. I didn't use the tail at all for the deer, but against a humanoid enemy like Loretta, it works really well. If you charge it, you'll get a mini stagger every time. Heavy rolling in this fight was a hard adjustment to make, but we really shouldn't be trying to do that in the first place since we can tank through a surprising amount of her spell spam. We'll finish with the weapon art for good measure, then proceed through the Haley tree until we get Marika's Sword Seal. That's as far as we're going for now, because it's time to get started on our next costume. This time we'll be going as a ghost, a timeless classic. This is definitely one of the simplest ones so far. All we really need is a white robe of some sort. As far as weapons are concerned, there's not really anything specific to a ghost. You could probably justify any weapon somehow, but I think the most fitting weapon for a spirit would be a spirit sword, of course. Surely by now I'm way too overpowered for the gargoyles to be an issue, so I'll fight them this time instead of doing parkour in the Shunning Grounds. I thought I would be saving a bit of time, but I guess I was wrong. I couldn't be overleveled for these guys even if I tried. I learned a bit more about the spirit sword through this fight. It's very short. It feels more like a dagger than a sword. In this way, it's kind of like the tailbone short sword, but at least that one is properly classified as a dagger even if the title is wrong. I guess it technically is a curved sword since it uses the curved sword moveset, but the way the weapon art's second slash doesn't connect after the slightest movement of the enemy is more of what you'd expect from a dagger. But anyways, that's finally over with. On to Fia's champions. I'm still stuck in tank mode and kinda forgot that there's such a thing as dodging, so I died to Fia's champion. As in, a single champion. Not even the group. I know I was kind of dissing this sword, but the Rancor Slash can still be fun to use. It's basically just sword dance with some ghost flame and a few skulls to chase down your enemy. Well, you know the drill. Time to get the curse mark of death for Fia. To start off the fight, we of course apply Unseen Form to become our ghostly self. It doesn't last long, but I'll try to reapply it when I can, though it can be hard to do that in the heat of battle. As I fought Fortisax, I learned even more about the Spirit Sword. One thing I noticed is that it does not have any frost buildup, even though it is a ghost flame weapon. The Rancor Slash skill apparently does have frost buildup, but it must be a low amount because I used the skill a ton throughout the fight and didn't trigger frostbite a single time. While the damage on the slashes themselves isn't bad, obviously I can't always hit Fortisax up close. so my plan was to rely on the projectiles to hit his head and stay clear of the lightning. Well, unfortunately for me, the tracking on these things sucks. Not only that, they also only travel a short distance, and usually dissipate right before they can reach him, even if I was casting right in front of him. It seems like the only reason any of the skulls connected was because I lucked out and Fortisax happened to dip his head down right into their path. Even if the Spirit Sword was a bit of a letdown, it's still a cool weapon, and it's still perfect for a ghost, and that's all that matters. This one is also a bit unconventional. We're going to be a Gorgon. In Greek mythology, a Gorgon is one of 3 sisters said to have snakes for hair and a gaze that turns men to stone, the most famous being Medusa. With all the snake-themed equipment in this game, we should be able to put together a pretty good costume for this. Although the full set would work since every piece has some type of snake ornamentation, I'm going to be swapping out the Duelist Greaves for something a bit more elegant. From here, we're going to get a few snake-themed weapons to go with our outfit. For our main weapon, we'll use the Serpent Flail found on the bottom of the Fog Rift Fort, near the first part of Shadow Altus. This is a Faith Dex weapon, so we'll go to Renala to reallocate our stats accordingly. After this, we'll go to Volcano Cave to grab the Coil Shield. The Star Scourge heirloom isn't really necessary, but it might be good to have if I want to use either of the weapons one-handed. The only spell we'll use for this build is Frenzied Burst to represent our Petrifying Gaze. I can't use my Dragon Communion seal anymore since I specced out of Arcane, so I'll get the Golden Order seal. Last but not least is the Godfrey icon to boost charged spells. And now, let's see how it all comes together when we fight the Fire Giant. Phase 1 is easy, so I try not to spend too much FP on this part. The only thing I use it for is for the Viper Bite skill, so I can get some poison going. Once I do that, the Serpent Flail manages just fine on its own, despite the Fire Giant's fire resistance. Phase 2 isn't difficult per se, it's just that you can be doing really well, then get unlucky when he does one stupid attack that derails the whole attempt. Most of the time, I don't even bother trying to dodge when I see him open his mouth. This is why I normally keep focusing on his legs even if it does less damage. The more times I attempted this, the less I used Frenzied Burst. I didn't want to accept it, but it was making the fight so tedious and I just wanted to be done with it. At this rate, our talisman slots were being wasted by accommodating Frenzied Burst for the second phase, so I finished Millicent's quest to get the Rotten Wing Sword insignia. As you can see, this makes Phase 1 go by very quickly, but unfortunately it doesn't work as well in Phase 2 since we have to chase him all over the place. I don't know why I thought having a so-called challenge by using fire against him would be a good idea. I already don't enjoy the fight, so why torture myself even more? I say as I take my fire-based build to the Godskin duo. I see this is going to be a fun fight as always. No matter what kind of build I'm running, my strategy for them always ends up boiling down to stagger, separate, repeat. At least using a flail isn't as bad as the Giant's Braid was. They definitely are absorbing a good bit of damage from it, but at least we can stagger them and take ripostes with it. Once I got the Noble to start his second phase, I would wait for him to roll, then jump on a pillar, and use Viper Bite to poison him while he's stuck in the animation. This would get him out of the way long enough for us to have time to face the Apostle alone. I also drank my Physic at this point for an extra boost to stance damage. If timed well, we can kill him at the exact moment the second Noble catches up to us. Now we just have to keep up with the pattern, and we should be good to go. For our next costume, we have a Grim Reaper. This is another simple one, so it shouldn't be too hard to put together an outfit. First, a Grim Reaper needs a scythe, and what better one to pick than the Grave Scythe wielded by those who live in death. After we have our weapon, we'll go back to the lake to get Bloodflame Blade from the Scarab next to the church. Here's what our stats are looking like before the Malenia fight. I feel like a simple build like this will be fun against Malenia, so let's try it out. The Bloodflame adds a nice touch to the costume too. Aside from the obvious benefits it provides, it gives our scythe a ghastly red glow that contrasts well with the pure black robes. The bleed works fast when the buff is applied, and is going to make this fight much easier than it normally would be with a basic weapon. But we're pretty evenly matched. Malenia can also cut through our health very quickly if we overextend our offense. As she starts the second phase, we can buff up with the physic and use a great rune to heal some health if needed. The default spinning slash skill is already good, so I kept it on and use it anytime we get a big opening like this for some burst damage. I often find myself struggling to strike a balance between too much hesitation and too much aggression in this phase, but with the blood flame buff running out rapidly, I was leaning more towards over-aggression as I tried to force the hemorrhage. Of course, the more I indulged in greedy habits, the more I started to panic when I realized I had used up all my flasks, and then I got caught in her Scarlet Aeonia. I did make one small adjustment to my build before trying this again. For some reason, I had more dexterity than strength, which is stupid since this is a strength scaling scythe, so I had to fix that. I never have many problems with Phase 1, but that doesn't mean it's ever okay to let your guard down. This time, I was ready to dodge the Aeonian Bloom. This is really the only time I feel safe reapplying Bloodflame Blade. As always, the moment the flower starts to fade, you can run back in for a free L2. You can see I tried to go for a second one, but stopped myself and instead used my last bit of stamina to retreat. Finally, a smart decision. She tries to escape our blade, as she has many times before, but only when fighting against death itself will she finally know defeat. On another note, I can't believe she waterfouled on her last millimeter of health twice in this fight. What are the chances? It's time to start preparing our next costume, and that is a jack-o'-lantern, or maybe jack-o'-lantern is a proper name. The armor isn't super strict for this one. There are a ton of things that could work. I'm just looking for something that looks dull and tattered. For the chest piece, I want the Vulgar Militia armor. This is very easy to farm in Caelid. I swear, there are like 20 of them out here, and I am not exaggerating. Like the Mad Pumpkinheads themselves, I want to wield a flail. Luckily, I didn't have to farm at all and got it to drop on the first try. The Pumpkinhead took a bit longer, but was still easy to get since there's a farming spot right next to the Saints Bridge site of Grace. Of course, the original Stingy Jack figure of whom I'm basing this costume around would have a turnip instead of a pumpkin, but over time pumpkins have become associated with the jack-o'-lantern, so it still works. That brings us to the most important part of the costume, the lantern. Sometimes I feel like she's just saying that to be nice. This time, I gotta admit, my movement here was clean. We're starting off strong with the Estelle fight. I just walked in and he already tries to put me in the meat grinder. The spinning chain is too much fun. It's not even that bad of a skill for this fight, as silly as it looks. While Jack's time in the spotlight was short, at least the flail made this costume a memorable one. Up next on our list of Halloween costumes is a Jester. We're going for more of a mad Jester archetype, so we're going to be swinging our trumpet around as a blunt instrument in addition to playing music with it. Along with an instrument, a mad Jester would likely be hiding a smaller weapon to play a little joke on his spectators. For this, we'll get the bloodstained dagger from the demi-humans. Our main weapon, the Envoy's Longhorn, doesn't have such a generous drop rate, but at least we can farm it easily from this Oracle Envoy at the start of the capital. For the outfit, it's just a mix of Rajier and Jaren set, with the Night Maiden twin crown for our Jester's hat. After this, we'll do Alexander's quest for the Shard of Alexander to boost our bubble-blowing capabilities. Lastly, as is befitting for one who is not quite right in the head, we will finish the last Volcano Manor request so we can challenge the gimmick boss Rykard as the bubble-blowing Jester. Although I prepared the bloodstained dagger for this particular situation, I didn't really need it because the damage from the Longhorn was actually a lot better than I expected, so I didn't need any extra support from the bleed buildup. This fight is designed entirely around the Serpent Hunter, So if you don't engage with the gimmick, it's definitely a boring fight. Though I would argue it's still pretty boring even if you fight it the intended way. I don't know, these types of gimmick fights aren't really my thing, so maybe it's just me. You can practically nullify the first phase by staying inside the lava and spamming an attack button. The lava seems scary at first, but once you've been standing in it for a while, you realize how little damage it actually does to you. The staggering is kind of annoying though, particularly when the serpent starts backing up and you get stun-locked by the lava while you're trying to heal or move out of the way. Now for phase 2. Since this is the real fight, I've saved all my bubbles for Rykard, and they are really good for giant enemies since most of the bubbles will connect. But apparently this damage wasn't broken enough for me, so I didn't see their potential at first. I went back to melee and tried to repeat the same strategy from earlier. The only problem with that is the skulls. If he casts this and you're still hugging his leg, you're gonna get stuck. Even if you do manage to escape, good luck figuring out what's happening on your screen through all the explosions. Although it's just a fraction of the damage they had before all the nerfs, using bubbles is still a viable strategy for both phases of this fight. It was still faster to kill the god-devouring serpent with the bubbles than with melee attacks. For the second phase, I stacked Bestial Vitality with the healing tier in my physic, so I could have constant regen going to offset the damage I'd be taking in the lava. I found that free aiming with the horn was better than locking on. He moves his head around so much that many of the bubbles were missing him before. Which is what led me to believe that the damage was worse than it actually is. I take it back, I did over 12k damage in a single FP bar, which is really good considering all the nerfs this skill has gotten. At the end of the fight, I was out of FP and flasks, and since I was constantly taking damage from the lava, it was very tense because he could kill me at any moment with any of his attacks. Thankfully, he froze up and let me keep attacking him, and it was finally over. With this next one, we're finally going into DLC boss territory, and the first monster we'll be dressing as in the Land of Shadow is the Kraken. This outfit is going to be so easy to make, we hardly have to wear anything at all. Aside from a real live octopus to put on our head, the only piece of armor we'll be wearing is the braided cord robe dropped by Hornsent after we invade him in Shadow Keep. It kind of matches the octopus head and could almost be interpreted as an extension of the tentacles with the way the cords drape across our body. The tooth whip is perfect for an octopus build because the teeth actually look like suction cups. I just wish we could get 2 of them in a single cycle. The pedal whip will have to do for our other tentacle, and once again, we need to swap our stats again to be able to use it. In the same way that the land octopuses can eat their own limbs to regenerate health, I want to get the Godskin's swaddling cloth to heal HP in between attacks. There's something I'd like to get from the dancing lion, so we're going to fight that one first. Well, I guess that's what you're supposed to do anyway. Our Shadow Tree blessing is up to 11 already, which may be a bit high for this fight, but we'll see how it goes. Being an octopus, I am pretty squishy, which unfortunately makes me more appetizing to the dancing lion. To make up for my low defenses, my tentacles are very powerful when combined with the Claw Talisman and the Rotten Wing Sword insignia. As is always the case with quick power stance weapons, it's very easy to activate the boost from successive attacks. It's better to focus on individual attacks instead of hoping to apply a status effect, which I can inflict 2 of, by the way. The bleed from the pedal whip never got a chance to build up enough, but after staggering the boss, I was able to poison it. I may not be able to take the riposte, but I made good use of the stagger by getting in a full heavy combo with my whips. With the Divine Beast defeated, we can claim the Divine Beast head for ourselves, which brings us to the next scary creature on the list. A Manticore is a mythical creature said to have the head of a man, body of a lion, and tail of a scorpion. We're more of a reverse Manticore since we have the head of a lion and the body of a man, but at least we got the tail right. For our first weapon, we need to unseal the Spirit Spring and ride to the northern nameless mausoleum, kill Red Bear, and get his claws. Of course, our other weapon is going to be the Scorpion Stinger. I've put my furs back on since I can't have a lion's body. I figured we could go for a beast-man hybrid look. The bear claws do inflict bleed, but due to Placidusax's high resistances, I wasn't able to bleed him out until the second phase. From here, I swapped to the Stinger to try to afflict him with Scarlet Rot, but by now this attempt was already dead since I had used up all my flasks and barely had any health left. I'm someone who gets hit a lot, and the Beast Head lowers the effectiveness of flasks, so this wasn't exactly a surprising outcome. It went pretty well for a first attempt considering how out of practice I am, so let's just keep the momentum going and try it again. A few attempts later, and I had gotten better at conserving my flasks during the first phase. I decided to use the Stinger first, since the Rot was way easier to trigger than the Bleed was. I also got an unexpected stagger with the dagger. Now I just need to chip him as much as I can before he vanishes to see if maybe I get lucky enough to outpace the laser. As soon as he flies up in the air when he's this low, I know it's coming, and I'm aware of my own abilities, or should I say inabilities, so I put my bubble on to be prepared. That wasn't so bad. I dodged all but 2 of his lasers. That might be a personal best for me. We'll finish him with the bear claws. Placidusax wasn't a fight I needed to do for any equipment. I'm just doing an all remembrance boss run so we can try out a variety of different Halloween builds. So, let's see what's up next on our list. Quite the contrast to the fearsome Manticore is a lovely mermaid. Well, as lovely as we can make it with what little we have to work with. One mermaid feature I'd like to capture is the long, beautiful hair they are often depicted with. I think the elaborate hairstyle on the Mermaid mask would suit a mermaid perfectly. For our tail, we obviously don't have any actual fishtail armor, but what we do have is the chainmail skirt, which is the closest we can get to the illusion of a scaled lower body. After we've gotten our armor, we just have to get both bubble spells from Shifra River. As a side note, I did also put on the mushroom arms, mostly to fill up the empty space. They almost look like fins, or scales, or a parasitic infection. Before I fight anything, I would like to get at least a few more magic damage buffs. I don't expect the bubble spells to be anything crazy, so I want to be safe. For the time being, the jellyfish shield is just for show since I don't have the stats to wield it. But we do have a functional jellyfish in the form of the spirit jellyfish, who's going to be our little underwater friend who we'll be taking with us on our adventures. I'm taking her to a few of the mini-bosses of the DLC who are blocking off optional areas. First, we have the Ancient Dragon Man, who is hardly worth mentioning, so let's move on to the next one. It'll be nice to be the one who gets to annoy Yori with summons for once. If I can get him to focus on the jellyfish, I can set him up for a fully buffed oracular bubble. Most of the time, my jellyfish got killed quickly, and I was left to fend for myself against all the summons. Eventually, Yori and I made a little agreement. I don't summon my buddy if you don't summon yours. But he wasn't taking me seriously, so I had to bring out my jelly girl to show him what happens when you don't keep your word. With my bubbles to stun him and her poison working in the background, the summoning portion of the fight wasn't as bad. I just had to wait until the second phase to summon her so she wouldn't die instantly. I also learned that the bubbles will instantly kill any of Yori's summons. I just need to be careful about the long casting animation. Near the end, I ran out of flasks mainly because of being constantly chased down by the fire breathers, but I wasn't about to give up on my jelly girl just yet. The poison was still ticking, and she even spat at him one more time to make sure he was dead. But now we return to the main route, making sure to take care of the NPC quests in Shadowkeep before we trigger the fight with Mesmer. Our jellyfish friend offers us her help once more. However, I worry that our next fight won't go as well for her as the others did. I did collect as many spirit blessings as I could to strengthen her, but she's still a support spirit. She's not really meant to take all the aggro. She tried the best she could. I mean, to be fair, I wasn't really pulling my own weight either. The poor girl even casted Stopra for me, and my bubbles still couldn't make it in time. This was already a disaster of a fight. I didn't even make it to phase 2 and had already used all my flasks. My friend was dead. Sure, Mesmer was poisoned, but I wouldn't make it much longer without heals anyway. Once I got back to the point of consistently reaching phase 2, my deaths were mostly caused by the usual culprit, the snake attack. As I attempted this, I realized that my jellyfish shield was only weighing me down as a cosmetic, so why not actually try to use the buff? If I activate Godric's Great Rune, I can two-hand the shield at the start of the fight to activate the buff and get some good hits on him after his AoE. Most of the time, I can't punish with the fully charged bubbles. The AoE is practically the only time that works as a punish. Even on some of his more punishable moves, like Mesmer's Assault or his other jumping spear throw, it's not a true punish. There is a little trick you can do with the bubbles if he dodges away. Since they're so slow, you can lead him back into their path before they dissipate. If you manage to hit him with enough bubbles, you can even get a stagger from it, which gives us another chance to hit him with the charge version of the spell. I think I finally got the hang of this attack. I was mainly having trouble with timing my dodges, but once I actually paid attention, I realized that you can see each individual snake open its mouth, which signals when you're supposed to dodge. Anyways, I tried to summon my jellyfish late since it worked in the Yori fight, but sadly this only makes it worse because he targets her relentlessly in this phase and kills her before she can even poison him. Oh well, she was good as a temporary distraction. I don't know what use kindling is to a mermaid, but I guess I'll take it off your hands. Now for our next costume. We have a mummy, of the undead variety of course. Our outfit is based on an ancient Egyptian mummy, wrapped in linen and wielding a shepherd's crook, which I chose to represent with the vulgar militia Shotel. Mummified pharaohs in particular are often depicted as vengeful, cursing all who disturb and pillage their burial sites. So we'll need to have something to represent that aspect of the mummy as well. Watchful Spirit would have been perfect for this build since it summons a vengeful spirit above your head, but I wasn't sure if it was burning the tree or killing Mesmer that locks you out of the Hornsent Grandam's quest. Guess which one it was. There is another option for us. The Horned Bairn serves the same purpose and will summon 6 homing curse orbs over our head. Also, can we talk about how cool it looks in this lighting with the white clothes against a dark background? We're going to test it out against Rolana. I usually fight her before Mesmer, but I forgot about her, so we get to fight her as a mummy. In addition to the things I mentioned, I brought along Bestial Sling, which I imagine is just rocks, sand, and other sediment that's accumulated around my body after being removed from my tomb and left exposed to the elements. Well, now I've absorbed it and can use it as a power, even if it damages her as much as you'd expect a couple of pebbles to. The Horned Bairn was also disappointing damage-wise. I thought maybe I could fix it by properly allocating my stats into Intelligence and Faith, which it scales with, but the scaling is so bad that it hardly made any difference, even when I drank the Holy Shrouding Tear. I'm mostly focused on staggering her with the Shotel. This is always a good strategy to fall back on if you feel stuck here. Most of the time, she's too aggressive to allow us enough time to cast anyway. The only exception is the Twin Moons, where dodging requires that you create distance. Bestial Sling may not be as strong as it used to be, but it will always be reliable as a finisher. The next costume we'll be wearing is something specific to Elden Ring. We are going to dress up as an Omen. Due to prejudice, I imagine that the people of the Lands Between would dress up as an Omen either as a form of mockery, or as a disguise to frighten evil spirits. Ironically, the Omen smirk mask mentions that the Omen themselves are haunted by evil spirits, an intentional cruelty on the Omen killer's part. But that's not the mask I chose. I considered it, but ultimately liked the look of the Curseblade mask better. As for the rest of the costume, if I were going for accuracy, I would use the Lamenter's mask to transform, but it's like the dragon situation. I want to wear a costume, not look like I skinned an Omen alive and I'm wearing one as a suit. So we're going to use a homemade Omen costume provided by none other than the lovable sewer dweller himself, the Dung Eater. Honestly, I think any large weapon is acceptable lore-wise, but I'm sticking with the ones that are wielded by the Omen themselves, the Warped Axe and the Omen Cleaver, whichever drops first. The last thing we need is the Regal Omen Bairn from Morgott's Remembrance. Then our costume will be complete. Since I'll have to fight him sooner or later, I'm going to try to get Gaius out of the way, but, well, you know how it is. Gaius is weak to holy damage, so I was hoping to get good use out of the Omen Baron, but it takes so long to cast that it's practically impossible to find an opening. But the times I did hit him were never in vain, as it did do really good damage to him, especially if all of the projectiles connected. The rest of the time, I got a little carried away fishing for a stagger. While the unique heavy attack of the cleaver is good for that purpose, the range is short, so he will sometimes slip out from under us mid-attack. The stagger never happened, but I was at full health with no flasks, a little FP, and nothing to lose, so I went for it. Our next costume will be a pirate. Much like the Jester, this isn't a monster, but a profession, even if it's not the most honorable line of work. Our outfit is put together from various sets I've collected over time clearing out enemies, most notably the hat from the Wandering Nobles. For our weapons, we'll be dual-wielding curved swords, the Scavengers and the Bandits. We can easily farm the Bandits' curved swords from one of the skeletons wielding it in a low-level area. When we have it, we set out to Volcano Cave once again, this time to kill the boss and get the jar cannon. I did craft volcano pots for bombs, but forgot to use them. But if you want to make a pirate build in this game, there's something to consider. Romina is our next target. Going into battle with our explosive great bolts, we're aiming to burn down this church a second time. The bolts themselves aren't that bad, but the jar cannon does take a long time to fire, and we can only carry 20 at a time. So they're really just a gimmick to add to the whole pirate theme. And most of the time I use them, I end up getting killed immediately afterwards, so it might not be the best trade-off. Jump attacks are going to be my go-to for this fight as well. The hurt box on her main body can be finicky at times, but jumping through her attacks always helps me dodge them, so if I miss my attack, she usually misses one of hers as well. She did prolong the fight a bit by stalling with her aerial attacks, but I enjoy this fight a lot and had a ton of fun with this build, even if I only got to fight one boss with it. Before we burn the ceiling tree, let's make sure we finished all the NPC quests. We're going to clear out the Stone Coffin Fisher in our next costume, which will be a Scarecrow. The outfit on this one isn't super strict, anything raggedy looking will work. The most important part is the hat. I use the Traveler's hat, but Egon's hat is another good Scarecrow hat. Naturally, I chose the Celebrant's Rib Rake as my weapon since it's a farming tool, and the fact that it's made from human bones makes it even better for our spooky Scarecrow. My Shadow Blessing is nearly maxed out, yet the Putrescent Knight was still doing a ton of damage. It was killing me in 2 hits, so I had to be careful to not be too greedy on this one. This boss in particular rewards a patient playstyle. It has the excessively long combos that are typical of bosses in this game, but there are plenty of opportunities to sneak in a quick hit or two once you've adjusted to its attack patterns. However, the Putrescent Knight is very evasive, so I've put Piercing Fang on the spear to counter that. When we've talked with Saint Trina, bested Tiolier, and exhausted all his dialogue, we can go to Anir Alim to kill Letta and Dane. With Ansbach and Tiolier by my side, this worked out perfectly as they both chose to focus on Letta while I could finish off Dane in a 1v1. Don't you just love being ganked, Letta? Tiolier didn't make it, but Letta wasn't in such a good spot herself, and Ansbach quickly reduced her to nothing but another spot on the blood-stained floor. We'll pick up Dane's footwork on our way out, then discuss what we'll be wearing for our next costume. Up next we have a Siren. Though often depicted as mermaids, we've already been a mermaid, so we're going with a classical, half-bird, half-woman siren for our costume. Sirens are typically depicted with long, styled hair, so I've put on some braids with a lovely flower ornament to charm our enemies. We already picked up the kick-boosting Divine Bird Greaves earlier, now we just need to get the wing portion of the costume. The Mausoleum Knights have winged armor that should be perfect for this. There's one right outside the Black Knife Catacombs that can be farmed easily with a simple walk back and forth from the Grace. The most important aspect of the Siren is her beautiful song. Not just her voice, but also the instrument she plays. If we solve the championed song puzzle, the painter will drop the heart bow. This weapon's not just for show either. It actually plays music when you shoot an arrow, letting you serenade your enemies as you slaughter them. The bow itself didn't seem to do that much damage. The Siren build is very flexible. We can snipe enemies from afar with the bow, or lure them in close to gore them with our talons. Like I said, the bow doesn't do much damage, but the barrage skill can be useful for building up status effects. Maybe it would be more accurate to use the heart bow the most, but I wanted to focus on using my kicks this time, because I'm very interested in finally trying out a hand-to-hand combat weapon. Plus, I'm wearing talismans tailored to the kicking aspect of my build, such as the Shattered Stone Talisman to boost kicking skills. I was not disappointed with Dane's footwork at all. The whole moveset is so much fun to play around with, and Dryleaf Whirlwind is a great skill that works perfectly as a punisher for Midra. We can use it to dance around Midra's moves and get him ready for another stagger. 3 whirlwinds should do the trick. Part of me was expecting this weapon to have a unique crit animation using your foot instead. The bow didn't see much use, but I was sure to use it for the actual kill so we could end this fight on a high note. Our next costume is the skeleton. There's not much to it. It's just a classic FromSoft skeleton with a small shield and a sword, with our character altered to produce mind-boggling effects. I've infused the scimitar with bleed so it can be accurate to the ones wielded by the skeletons themselves. And because bleed is powerful, so of course I'm going to use it against Malekith. Considering we're fighting him naked, it's not a good idea to get too caught up in trying to bleed him out. We aren't going to win any trades like this. This is a lesson that I did not take to heart, even in the second phase. I definitely find it easier to rush him down in this phase, though. Using the stance break tier makes a stagger happen in just a few jump attacks. After this, it wouldn't be a bad idea to start going through Ash and Lanedale next, so let's start preparing a costume for that. We have transformed into a beautiful succubus in an attempt to seduce the all-knowing, complete with an alluring gown and long, lustrous hair. Her role as a seductress is similar to the Siren. However, a succubus is a demon, most often associated with sleep and dreams, where she is said to begin her affairs with humans. Sleep is unfortunately not so useful in this game, but we can definitely make it work against an NPC boss like Gideon. If we do manage to put something to sleep, we have St. Trina's Smile to give us a damage boost after the fact. Another aspect I want to capture is the ability of a succubus to absorb the life force of their partners. So we'll keep the Clinging Bone as a sidearm for the Lifesteal Fist skill. Gideon will provide a free demonstration, which puts us in a great position to put him to sleep, then set him up for another fist. While I'm happy I didn't have to spend too much time in this fight, I would prefer to not spend any time with him at all, and I'm a succubus, so that's saying something. I've never used Lifesteal Fist in PvE, player model type enemies don't count, so to satisfy my curiosity, I'll see if it does anything at all to Godfrey. Obviously, I knew the animation wouldn't connect on his model, but I was hoping that maybe the damage would be really good, or I'd recover health on hit, or I don't know, something to make it worthwhile. But now we know, so we don't have to waste our time with it again. I was able to put him to sleep once in Phase 1, which lets us get huge stance damage on him and eventually a stagger. We'd better enjoy all these free hits while they last, because it's near impossible to get this man to go to sleep in Phase 2. Despite his wild state, the old lord of a lifeless land can't hide the fact that his own life force is dwindling. I'm simply the collector. The next monster is another infamous life sucker, a vampire. The vampire we're dressing as is a refined creature, probably a member of the nobility, so we must dress accordingly. I often see vampire builds in these games focused on being bleed builds, which makes sense. Vampires survive by drinking blood, so they would want a weapon that's efficient at drawing blood. But a lot of weapons in this game also shoot blood at the enemies, which would be wasteful, so instead, we'll use weapons and equipment that exclusively siphon health off of enemies to represent sucking their blood. I'm also throwing on the Blessed Dew talisman because why not? And you know what? I'm keeping the hair too. This is gonna be fun because we get to use the Blasphemous Blade, which is arguably the best weapon in the game, and with an actual strong setup, I think maybe I'm ready to challenge Consort Radahn. If possible, I want to use Taker's Flames when I can to save my flasks, but it takes me a moment to adjust this fight every playthrough. While the Talisman of the Dread would be another good option, I'm not relying on the skill enough to justify it, and I already have the Shard of Alexander, so we should be fine. I decided to bring along the Two-Handed Sword Talisman. I don't think you can really go wrong with that one. As long as I can deal with the Meteor Clone attack, I should be okay. His other moves shouldn't be deadly, as long as we can dodge at least most of his hits. I'm still not perfect at dodging this one, but whatever health I lose, I can gain back by punishing with Taker's Flames. For once, I didn't get hit by the giant meteorite. With that kind of luck, I can't afford to screw this fight up now. And that's the key to this fight. You have to keep your cool, because this fight just doesn't give you the leeway to panic. On this particular run, I enjoyed fighting this, but only because I was using an overpowered weapon with an overpowered skill and getting free health for it. We've got a few optional bosses left in the DLC. We'll clear them out one by one, starting with Metter, dressed as a werewolf. I got the beast claws earlier, so our weapon's covered. Aside from our fur raiment, we'll put on Malekith's gauntlets and greaves to look like claws, and obviously the Black Wolf mask. In addition to the talisman, I went to get the Thorny Tear for boosting consecutive attacks. We'll need stamina to use this effectively, so let's also pick up the Two-Headed Turtle talisman for faster stamina regen. I know that I was complaining a lot about Consort Radahn before, but as I've gotten more experience with the DLC bosses, I realized that I hate the Metter fight even more. I even admitted it myself. I kind of enjoyed the Radahn fight this time around, but so far not a single fight with her has been an enjoyable one. I usually don't like to be super negative about bosses like this, but I haven't found one redeeming quality about this fight as far as game mechanics are concerned. And that damn laser, I still don't even know if I can consistently dodge this. It was mostly my fault that I got hit by the initial blast, but somehow I ended up in a blind spot for the rest of the attack's duration. I don't know if there is a way to recreate this or if it's pure luck. I'm guessing it's the latter. Go ahead and run from the fight since that's all you know how to do, coward. The next costume on the list is a witch, something we can find many of in the Lands Between if we need inspiration. I want to stick to spells that are either scary looking or blasphemous in some way, as witches themselves are heretics who defy the Golden Order. I also snuck in Shard Spiral since we bought it off a witch. It's for accuracy, totally not because I want to cheese Bale with it or anything. Impenetrable Thorns was terrible in this fight, all it did was waste my health. Basically every gimmick spell that I brought along hurt me in some way. When I wrote this, I meant this in terms of being disadvantageous to cast, but I realized that for almost all of them, it also applied in the literal sense. Night Maiden's Mist, Impenetrable Thorns, Briars of Sin. I did have Explosive Ghost Flame if I didn't want to take any damage, but every time I tried to branch out and do creative setups, I got killed for it. So can you blame me for defaulting to Shard Spiral? Just because our spells are themed doesn't mean they have to be bad. I just need to be better at choosing them. For this fight, typical projectile type spells are probably the best way to go, so I collected a few more Ghost Flame spells and went back to try again with my new lineup. I could have put on the Prince of Death staff for a damage boost, but we don't need two staves to clutter up our costume. Besides, this run isn't about damage, right? Okay, we're 2 for 2 on dodging desperation moves now. I figured this one wouldn't be too bad since I'm essentially just a mage, but emo. For the last optional boss of the DLC, we'll be dressing up as a Yeti. We're going to be using ice-themed spells, particularly the more primal ones. The Horned Warrior Greaves give the illusion of big feet, and of course we will be using Dane's footwork again for this costume. We'll throw on Divine Beast Frost Stomp, then get Borealis' Mist to use as our ice spell. It was very hard to cast this uninterrupted against the Shadow Tree avatar, so unfortunately I realized I wouldn't be able to use it that much and would have to rely on other sources for Frostbite. What I ended up doing was cold infusing Dane's footwork so that I didn't have to stomp every time I wanted to build up Frostbite. Hitting the head is pretty easy to do with the jumping kicks, and when I took a moment to slow down, I realized that I was making this fight so much harder with my impatience. After a couple of tries, I was making it to phase 3 consistently, and conserving my FP flask to save the frost stomping for later in the fight. Phase 3 does have an opening for Borealis' Mist after the AoE, but I was so far away that I didn't really have enough time to cast it. I tried to finish with it anyway, but with no flask to heal myself against a boss that inflicts bleed, I was in no place to be styling on the boss. So while this wasn't the flashiest build, it was a fun one that had a good amount of versatility. Last on the list is one more simple costume to close it out, a zombie. All we need are our fists, with dry leaf arts to support them. For the clothes, we just need something dirty and old. I also threw in a few pieces of the Royal Remains set so we look a little more decomposed, I guess. I considered using Bestial Sling again since I imagine zombies are also covered in dirt from rising out of the grave, but I already did that gimmick on the mummy. The zombie costume deserves something unique. Then it hit me. There is literally a consumable in this game that lets you throw chunks of flesh at your enemies. What could be more fitting than that for a zombie? These are very easy to farm from jar innards in Shadow Keep, so we'll have a full stack of these in no time. It's also quite generous that you can hold 40 of these at a time in this inventory limiting age. Alright, moment of truth. Are chunks of meat viable against Radagon? That one didn't count, so I asked the game again. Well damn, Radagon, why even waste your energy parrying? I knew the 40 limit was suspicious. This is supposed to be a simple build, but I felt like it was still missing something. I wanted to add something that represented the whole coming back from the dead thing, and while the Royal Remains armor kind of does that, since it heals near death only, I got inspired by another zombie build I had seen a while back, which I will link in the description. This build combines the twin bird kite shield, the red feathered branch sword, and the blue feathered branch sword for a boost to attack and defense when below 20% health. The damage buff isn't anything super crazy, I tested it out here on Radagon, but it's something to consider in a long fight like this where you might run out of flasks and be stuck with low health on Elden Beast. Even if it isn't much, it's still something, and it's nice to know that it'll be there if we need it. As for me, I ended up being just fine on the Elden Beast. The hand-to-hand arts worked very well, and I even got the elusive Elden Beast stagger. And I have some flasks to burn, so there's only one proper way to finish this fight. I hope you enjoyed this Elden Ring Halloween special. Which costume in the run did you like the most? As always, feel free to leave any suggestions you have for future videos in the comments. I read them all. If you liked this video, there will be many more in the future, but until then, there are lots of themed runs about the Souls series on my channel if you want to see more. I'll see you next time. Happy Halloween!